The rooftops of Lagos came up through the clouds the same way they always did, and I was ready for them this time. That is the difference between this arrival and the last one, which had been 11 months ago and which I told you about in the episode about the school. The first trip. The trip when I had pressed my face to the window to confirm that Lagos was still there, that 28 years had not somehow unmade it, that the city continued its specific continuation regardless of whether I was present to witness it. On that trip, I had arrived with a purpose I understood but had not yet made real, a school that existed as a plan and a deposit and a conversation with council elders and an architect who understood how mango trees worked in afternoon light.
On that trip, Lagos had surprised me with its sameness and its difference simultaneously, had been the city of my childhood and also a city I was approaching as something close to a stranger. The specific disorientation of returning to a place you left before you fully understood it. This time, I was not surprised. This time, I watched the rooftops come up through the clouds, and I recognized them the way you recognize a face you have been waiting to see. Not the particular features, which were too small at this altitude to be distinct, but the specific composition of the whole, the density and the color, and the particular way the city arranged itself relative to the water and the sky. The school was finished. I had seen photographs, of course. Kolade had been sending photographs with regularity since the walls went up in January. Not the documentary photographs of a progress report, but the photographs of someone who understood that the person receiving them was not simply tracking construction milestones, but was watching something become real that had previously existed only as intention. He sent photographs the way Marcus used to fix things, without announcement, simply because the thing needed doing, and he was the person who was there to do it. The photographs had shown me the walls, and then the roof, and then the windows, and then the interior, and then the shelves Adekunle had designed for the library, which were built from the specific wood of a local supplier that Adekunle had found after 3 conversations with Chief Adeoye, who had the specific connections that came from 70 years of knowing everyone who mattered in Mushin. The shells were dark and warm-colored, and would, when the afternoon light came through the window that Adekunle had positioned correctly, glow in a way that made books on shelves look like what they were, rather than simply what they contained. I had seen all of this in photographs. I was going to see it in person. My name is Patience Adeyemi. It was March, 15 months after the first Lagos trip, and I was on a plane descending toward Murtala Muhammad International Airport with Joy beside me, which was the difference from every other Lagos trip I had made in 28 years of living in America, which was that I had always made them alone. Joy had never been to Nigeria. She had been born in Houston, had grown up in Houston, had learned to cook in a Houston kitchen, had become a Houston chef whose specific food was the specific expression of a specific place that was both American and Nigerian, without being entirely either.
She had spent her whole life cooking the food of a country she had never been to, which was not unusual for the children of immigrants, the inheritance of a homeland through food and language and story rather than through presence, but which was, I had decided sometime in January, something that needed to be corrected. I had told her on a Thursday evening in January that I was going to Lagos in March for the school opening and that I wanted her to come. She had looked at me with the expression she had when she was receiving information that required time rather than an immediate response.
The opening, she said. The Adunola Adeyemi Memorial School, I said. Named for your grandmother. You should be there. She was quiet for a moment. I've never been, she said. I know, I said. I don't speak Yoruba, she said. Neither do I said. Not well. It didn't stop me from building a school there. She was quiet again, the quality of quiet she had when she was moving from resistance to acceptance. The specific transition that was not defeat, but the recognition that something was correct. Who else will be there, she said. Kolade, I said. Chief Adeoye, the Council of Market Elders, the community, and someone else, possibly. I'm not certain yet. She looked at me at the words someone else and possibly. The man from December, she said. He may be in Lagos at the same time, I said. Separately, for business. I haven't confirmed. She considered this. If I'm going, she said, I want to see the market, the position grandfather, the position your mother had.
And I want to see the kitchen, wherever the cooking happened. The kitchen was the whole flat, I said. There was a 2-burner stove and the table and a window. Show me the window, she said. And that was how Joy Carter, 30 years old, head chef of Patience's Table, came to be beside me on a plane descending toward the city where her grandmother had sold rice and tomato paste from a wooden table for 30 years, where her mother had grown up in a flat with a 2-burner stove and a window that looked onto laundry that never fully dried, where a school was opening tomorrow morning in a building with a library under mango trees that bore the name Adunola Adeyemi. The plane landed at 12:41 in the afternoon. Kolade was waiting at arrivals with a sign, which I had expected.
The sign this time said, Patience and Joy, and below it, in Yoruba script, something I could not fully read, but that Joy would later ask him to translate, and that he would tell her meant, the two who were always going to arrive. He embraced me in the way he had embraced me the last time, with the length that the distance between us required. Then he looked at Joy for a long moment, at his niece, whom he had met once when she was 4 years old, and once at a family video call, and now in person at 30, at Murtala Muhammad International Airport, with the specific bearing of a woman who was completely herself in any room she walked into. You look like her, he said, not to Joy's face, to mine. A statement of observation, private. I know, I said. No, he said, I mean Mama, not you.
I looked at Joy, standing with her bag, looking at the arrivals hall with the specific attention she brought to everything she encountered for the first time, reading the room in the way she read every room. I looked at her, and then I thought about my mother in Mushin Market, squinting against the sun in the 2008 photograph, and I thought, yes, it was possible. Something in the set of the chin, the stillness of the assessment. Let's go, I said. She wants to see the window. We went to the flat first. Not because it was on the way to anywhere, it was not particularly, but because Joy had asked, and Joy's asking was specific, which meant it mattered specifically and required specific attention. Kolade drove us through Mushin in the Toyota he had acquired 6 months ago, the first vehicle he had owned since selling the car before the money trouble, purchased with the specific satisfaction of a man who had been through the fire and had come out the other side with the things he had before, reconstituted, rebuilt. The flat looked the same. Of course it looked the same. It was a building in Lagos, which meant it had the specific quality of surviving whatever happened in the world outside it through the sheer stubbornness of concrete and corrugated metal and the occasional application of exterior paint and colors that were chosen for availability rather than aesthetics. The same 4 stories. the same metal gates with the same creak I had remembered from 30 years of going in and out. Joy stood on the street and looked at the building with the specific quality of looking that she brought to ingredient assessment, to the review of a new dish, to the evaluation of anything that she needed to understand from the outside before she could understand it from the inside. "Which window?" she said. I looked at the building. I had not been inside in over a year, had not been inside many times in the years since I left, had stood on this street perhaps 6 times in 28 years.
But I knew which window. "Third floor," I said. "Left side, the one with the blue frame." She looked at the window. "What could you see from it?" she said. "The back wall of the building behind," I said, "and someone's laundry. Always the same laundry, or what felt like the same laundry. It never seemed to dry." She nodded. She stood looking at the window for longer than most people would stand looking at a window on a street in Lagos in the afternoon heat. Then she said, "Tell me what she cooked." And I told her. Standing on the street in front of the flat in Mushin, with Kolade standing nearby with his arms folded in the posture of a man who had heard this story before and was glad to hear it again, with the street doing its Lagos midday things around us, the motorbikes, the vendors, the children in school uniforms going somewhere in a group, the particular ambient noise of a city that never stopped, I told my daughter what her grandmother had cooked in the flat with the 2-burner stove and the window. The stew first, the specific color of it, which was the color of palm oil cooked past its raw stage and combined with tomatoes that had been reduced until they were almost paste, a color that I had spent years trying to reproduce in Houston kitchens with American ingredients, and that I came closest to when I used the San Antonio peppers that Joy had been building dishes around since the fall. The way it smelled in the small kitchen, which was a smell that moved through the flat in the way smells move through small spaces, completely, leaving nothing unaffected. The rice. My mother's rice was different from mine, which was different from my grandmother's, which was different from Joy's. These were not failures of inheritance, but the specific adaptations that cooking made across generations. Each version true to the original, and also true to the hands and the circumstances of the person making it. My grandmother's rice had been made over wood fire, and my mother's had been made on the 2-burner gas stove, and mine had been made on commercial equipment for 22 years, and Joy's was made with the adjustments that came from 3 years of formal culinary training and 24 years of growing up in my kitchen. The pepper soup. I had not told Joy about making the pepper soup in December for Emeka's visit, or rather, I had told her that I had made it, but had not told her all the specific reason, and I thought now, standing on the street in Mushin, that perhaps the reason was more transparent than I had intended, because the pepper soup was the thing I made when the care needed to be expressed through food rather than through words, and Joy had grown up watching me understand this, and had understood it herself, and had begun keeping Monday portions of specials for me in the kitchen as her version of the same thing. She listened to all of this without taking notes, without recording, with the full listening that was her specific quality. And then she said, "When we get back to Houston, I want to make a dish that uses all 3. The stew base, the rice technique, the pepper soup spice blend. Something that holds all of them in one thing without any of them disappearing." I looked at her. "That's difficult," I said. "Yes," she said. "That's why I want to do it." We went to the market. It was mid-afternoon when we arrived, which was not the market's peak hour. The peak was morning. the specific hour when everything was freshest and the buying and selling had its maximum intensity, but which was the hour when the market was most itself in a different way, when the afternoon had settled into its steady continuation, when the vendors who had been there since 6 in the morning had reached the comfortable middle of the day, and the selling had the ease of something that had been doing itself for long enough to no longer require conscious effort. Colade's position, my mother's position, now his position, registered under the family name through the market association, was near the back of the main aisle, where the provision sellers were concentrated, where rice and beans and palm oil and the dried goods that Lagos kitchens required appeared in the organized plenty of a market that had been serving these needs for generations. He had a table, not a wooden table with a Coca-Cola umbrella. Those had gone out of fashion by the time he returned, replaced by the metal folding tables that were lighter and easier to transport, and that had a different quality from the old ones. Not worse, but different, the way most things that replaced older things were. But he had the position. He had the position under the family name. When he introduced himself to vendors who had been there long enough to remember, he was recognized as the son of old Mama Patience, which was the recognition he had told me about during the school project. The recognition that came with the position rather than with his own history in this market, which he was only beginning to build. He was building it. I could see this from the interactions we witnessed in the 20 minutes we spent at his position. The specific ease of a man who had been doing something long enough that the doing had started to become natural, who had been here every day since October, and who was beginning to have the relationships that made a market position real rather than simply registered. Joy stood at the edge of the position and watched. She watched the way she watched anything she wanted to understand from the inside, which was completely and without hurrying and without performing the watching. After a while she said to Colade, "What do you sell?" "Provisions," he said, "mostly rice and beans and palm oil. Some imported goods on the side. That's still the import business connection that Emeka helped establish." Joy looked at the table. "No pepper?" she said. "No pepper," Colade said. "Pepper is a specialist item. You need relationships with farmers." Joy looked at me. "Your grandmother didn't sell pepper," I said. "She sold staples. The pepper was from her own small garden." "I know," Joy said. "I was just thinking." We went to the school site that evening, before the light went completely. Not for the opening ceremony, that was tomorrow morning, but for the specific experience of seeing the building for the first time in the evening light, which was the light I had thought about when I had first described the project to Adekunle Bello in a compound with a ceiling fan and Mama Takunbo listening and Iya Agba measuring everything with her silence. The building was beautiful. I want to say that plainly rather than elaborately, because the elaborations that suggest themselves, the descriptions of the walls and the roof and the windows and the specific color of the local stone that Adekunle had sourced from a quarry in Ogun State, are all true, but are not the thing. The thing is that when I stood in front of the school at 6 in the evening in the March light of Mushin, with Joy beside me and Colade a step behind us, in the specific position of someone who has been involved in a project from the beginning and who steps back slightly when the people for whom the project was made see it for the first time, I understood something that I had not fully understood from the photographs, which was that the building was not an idea that had been made physical. It was a physical thing that had always been going to be here. that had been present in some form since the moment my grandmother taught my mother to cook rice in a kitchen with a window that looked onto laundry, that had been accumulating in the family's history of women who made things available to the people who needed them, and that had now arrived in its specific form at its specific address in Mushin. The gate was open. We walked through. The courtyard was a simple rectangle, bordered on 3 sides by the classroom wing and on the 4th by the wall of the adjacent building, the same wall that had been there when the lot was empty. Adekunle had planted something along this wall, a row of small plants that I did not immediately identify, but that Kolade told me were morning glory, chosen because they grew fast and because the blue flowers would, in 6 months, cover the wall with color that was visible from the classroom windows and from the courtyard. 6 months from now, those flowers would be blooming. The children who would see them had not yet arrived. The library was at the back of the building, under the mango trees. I had seen the photographs, and the photographs had been accurate, and they had not been sufficient. The library was a room of approximately 40 square meters, with the high windows that Adekunle had designed to catch the afternoon light, and with the shelves that were built from the local wood that Chief Adeoye's connection had provided, and that glowed in the evening light with the specific warmth of wood that has been properly worked and treated.
The shelves were partially filled. The books that had been acquired through my contacts in Houston and through the publisher Emeka had connected me with in Lagos, and through a diaspora donation drive that the Neighborhood Preservation Organization in 3rd Ward had organized, which had collected approximately 300 books in the previous 3 months and shipped them at a cost that 3 of our regular donors had covered voluntarily when they heard what the books were for. 300 books. Not a library in the full sense, not yet. The beginning of a library, which was what the beginning of anything was. The state that required faith in the continuation more than satisfaction with the present. Joy walked to the shelves. She ran her hand along the spines of the books, slowly, in the way she ran her hands along the edge of a prep station at the beginning of a service, feeling the surface, registering what was there. She stopped at a book. She took it off the shelf. It was a children's book in Yoruba and English, with illustrations in the bright, saturated style of West African children's publishing. She held it for a moment. "Do you remember learning to read?" she said. Not to me specifically, to the air in the room, to the question itself. "Poorly," I said, "in English. I could read Yoruba, but not as well." "I never learned Yoruba," she said. "You didn't teach me." "No," I said, "I didn't." She put the book back on the shelf. "Maybe the school will teach me," she said, "eventually, when it's been running long enough." I looked at her. "You could come back," I said, "to see it running." "Yes," she said, "I could." The ceremony was at 10 in the morning. I want to tell you about the night before, because the night before was its own specific thing that the ceremony itself could not contain. Kolade had arranged for us to stay in a guest house 2 streets from the school, a clean, well-maintained place run by a woman named Aunty Tayo, who had been operating it for 12 years and who had the specific quality of a person who understood that the service she was providing was not simply accommodation, but the creation of the conditions in which people who were far from home could rest adequately,
which required different things from the creation of the conditions in which people who were near home could rest. She fed us at 8 in the evening, not restaurant food, house food, the food that was made for specific people who were about to do something specific the following morning. Jollof rice that was close to my grandmother's without being identical, the specific Lagos version rather than the diaspora version, made with the rice and the tomatoes and the palm oil that I recognized from childhood as the baseline of the flavor. Fish stew, a car that she had made fresh in the small kitchen at the back of the guest house, the smell of which had come through the building an hour before dinner, in the way that the smell of anything fried in good oil at the right temperature came through buildings, which was completely. Joy ate and said nothing for a while. Then she said to Aunty Tayo, "What's in the akar that makes it different from mine?" Aunty Tayo looked at her with the expression of someone who has been asked a cooking question that they consider obvious. "Crayfish," she said. "I use crayfish," Joy said. "How much?" Aunty Tayo said. Joy was quiet for a moment. "More than that," Aunty Tayo said, and returned to the kitchen.
We sat at the table in the guest house dining room after the food was cleared, Kolade and Joy and me, in the March evening that was cooler than the March afternoon had been, but still warm in the way that Mushin evenings were warm. The warmth that came not from direct sun, but from the accumulated heat of the day stored in the walls and the streets and the compressed living of the neighborhood. Kolade was quiet for a while, in the comfortable quiet of someone who had been in the process of becoming something over the past 18 months, and who understood that certain moments required the quiet of completion rather than the noise of anticipation. I looked at my brother, who was 43 years old and had an auto repair shop on a street in Ikeja, not yet fully his own, still partly through the connection to the man whose business he had learned in, but moving toward his own in the specific way of someone who was doing it correctly and slowly, rather than quickly and incorrectly, which was the way that things worth having were done, and who had a position in the market under the family name, and who had managed the construction of a school for 15 months, and who was going to open that school tomorrow morning in the name of our mother. "What do you think she would say?" I said. He understood immediately who I meant. "She would say it took too long," he said. "She would say, why did it take this long when the children needed it all this time?" "Yes," I said, "that's what she would say." "And then she would ask who made the food for the opening," he said. "And she would want to know the specific dishes."
"Aunty Tayo's kitchen is doing the food," I said. Then she would go to Aunty Tayo's kitchen and stand in it for an hour before anyone cooked anything, he said, to make sure the stove was clean and the oil was fresh. I laughed. Joy laughed. Kolade smiled. The smile of someone who is telling something true about a person they loved, and who is moved by the telling without being broken by it. "She was very particular about clean stoves," Kolade said. "She never said why. She just needed to know the stove was clean before any cooking happened on it." "I know why," I said. "Tell me," he said. "Because our grandmother's stove was never clean," I said. "There was never enough time to clean it properly. Grandmother cooked every day for 8 people on a stove that was always slightly burnt at the edges, and she never complained about it. But I think Mama spent her whole life making up for the stove that grandmother should have had. The clean stove was the thing she could give to her own cooking that grandmother didn't have." Kolade was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know that," he said. "Neither did I until I was 40, I said. "Some things you understand by living long enough." Joy was looking at the tablecloth. "I want to call the dish something," she said. "The one I'm going to make when we get back. The one with the stew base and the rice technique and the pepper soup blend.
I want to call it something that is the right name." "What are you thinking?" I said. "I'm thinking about the stove," she said. "About what it means to have the right stove. To cook on the right stove. Not as a luxury, as a condition of doing the work correctly." She looked up. "I want to call it the right conditions," she said. "That's what the dish is about. The thing you make when all the right conditions are present." Kolade looked at her. Then he looked at me. "She is yours," he said. "She is herself," I said. "Both," he said. The ceremony began at 10:03, which was 3 minutes late by the posted time, and which was, by Nigerian ceremony standards, approximately on time. Chief Adeoye opened it.
He stood in the courtyard of the school in the March morning light, which was the specific quality of light that March morning in Mushin produced. Warm already at 10 in the morning, the sun having committed to the day without the tentativeness of earlier months. The specific brightness of a season that was transitioning toward the heat of April and May, but had not yet arrived there. That was in the precise equilibrium of warm without harsh, bright without blinding. He was in traditional dress, the finest version of it, which communicated what the occasion was without being told, and which had the quality of formality that belonged to the specific kind of celebration that was not a celebration of achievement, but of arrival, not of something that had been accomplished by any single person, but of something that had been accumulated over time by the specific circumstances of a family and a neighborhood, and the particular stubbornness of two women, one dead and one present, who had believed that things that needed to exist could be made to exist if someone did the specific work of making them. The community was there. I want to tell you who was in the courtyard of the Aunty Adeyemi Memorial School on the morning of its opening, because the who mattered. Mama Tokumbo, the elder from the Market Council, who had spoken at the council meeting 11 months ago and who had arrived this morning with the specific energy of someone who had been told yes and had shown up to confirm it in person. She had brought 3 of the other market vendors with her, women who had been at adjacent stalls to my mother's position for years and who had not known until Kolade told them about the school project that the daughter of old Mama Patience had come back to build something. Adekunle Bello, the architect, who was 32 years old and who had arrived with his portfolio of the design process, not to show it, simply to have it present, the documentation of the work that had produced the building, the evidence of the specific intelligence that had understood how mango trees worked in afternoon light, and had designed a library accordingly. The mechanic shop owner from Ikeja, whose name I had not known, but who was Kolade's boss, or former boss, or something in between, since the arrangement had become complicated in the way of relationships that began as employment and evolved into something closer to partnership as the employed person demonstrated his capabilities, who had driven an hour from Ikeja to be at the opening because Kolade had told him about it, and because he was a man who understood that the opening of a school in the neighborhood where a man had grown up was an event that deserved presence. The local teachers who had been hired to staff the school, 3 women and 1 man in their 30s and 40s, who were from various parts of Lagos, but who had been selected specifically for their commitment to the kind of teaching that a community school in Mushin required, which was the kind that understood the specific children it would serve, and did not simply apply a generic curriculum without adjustment.
They had been interviewed by a committee that Kolade had organized through connections with the Education Authority, the legitimate Education Authority, not Mr. Adebayo's office. And their hiring had been the most detailed single piece of work that Kolade had done in the 15 months of the project. About 40 people from the neighborhood, not all of them from families with children who would attend the school. Some of them simply the people who lived near the lot that had been empty and was now a building, who had watched the construction happen and had understood from the watching what kind of building was being constructed, and who had come because the presence of something new and good in a neighborhood was an occasion that deserved witness regardless of whether you were personally its intended beneficiary. And standing at the edge of the courtyard, slightly apart from the main gathering, in the posture of someone who has arrived to witness something rather than to participate in it, was Emeka Obi. He had texted me on Wednesday to say he would be in Lagos through Friday for meetings with the supply chain partners that the Meridian Logistics relationship had introduced him to, and that he knew the school opening was Thursday morning and that he would like to come if that was acceptable. I had said yes in the specific way I had been saying yes to things since December, which was without elaborating and without requiring clarification of what yes meant for the larger picture of things, which was still in the process of becoming what it was. He had come. He was standing at the edge of the courtyard in a well-pressed dark blue jacket that was slightly too warm for the March Mushin morning, which I recognized as the specific temperature calibration problem of someone whose default is London rather than Lagos. He was watching the ceremony with the quality of attention he brought to everything, complete, genuine, not performing presence, but simply being present. When he caught my eye, he did not wave or move toward me. He nodded once, the nod of someone confirming an arrival, and I nodded back, and that was enough for the moment. Chief Adeoye spoke for 20 minutes, not 20 minutes of ceremony language, 20 minutes of specific and particular truth, the kind of truth that an elder speaks when he has been in a neighborhood long enough to understand what the things he is celebrating actually mean, rather than what they appear to mean. He spoke about old Mama Patience, not the abstract mother of the daughter who had come from America with money to build something, the specific woman who had been in this market for 30 years, who had brought him ogi on mornings when he was going to the depot, who had said a man who does good work deserves something good in his stomach, and had meant it as a principle rather than a sentiment. He spoke about what it meant for a community to have a school, not the standard things that were said about education and opportunity in the future, the specific thing, the thing that he had observed in 70 years of living in this neighborhood, which was that the places where children learned in the specific language and with the specific knowledge of their specific community produced a different kind of adult from the places where children learned in a generic language about generic knowledge. He said, "What we are opening today is not a building, it is a condition in which the children of this neighborhood can learn who they are and what they have and what the people who came before them did with what they had, and then decide for themselves what to do with what they have been given." Mama Tokumbo spoke after Chief Adeoye. She spoke about the market, which was what she knew best, and which was what was most relevant because the school was in the market neighborhood, and the children who would attend it were the children of the market families, and what they learned about the market was what they would bring to the decisions they made later about whether to stay in the neighborhood or to leave it and under what conditions. She said, "I have been in this market for 40 years. I have watched the children of my neighbors leave this neighborhood and come back and leave again and sometimes come back for the last time. What I have observed is that the ones who come back and stay are the ones who understand what they left, not the ones who missed it most, the ones who understood it most. Understanding is not the same as missing. You can miss a place and not understand it. Understanding is what this school is for. She sat down. Then it was my turn.
I had not written anything out this time, not the way I had written out the 8 minutes for the Houston Council presentation. I had thought about what to say, which was different from writing it. And I had thought about it in the way I thought about important things, which was while doing other things, while cooking the lunch service and the dinner service and the Saturday service, and sitting in booth number 4 and making coffee in the morning. What I had arrived at, through thinking while doing other things, was this. I was not going to talk about what the school was or what it would do. That had been said by people who knew it better than I did, by Chief Adeoye and Mama Tokumbo and the Council of Elders.
What I could say that they could not was what it had cost me to build it, which was not money. The money had been manageable, had been within the range of what I had accumulated over 22 years of work in Houston. But the specific decision to come back not as a visitor, but as someone who was leaving something here, something with her mother's name on it, something that would continue to exist in this place long after both of us were gone. I stood in the courtyard of the Aunty Adeyemi Memorial School under the March morning sun, and I said, "My mother's name was Adunola. In Yoruba, Adunola means sweetness has become wealth. She gave me this name as a middle name when I was born, and spent 30 years deciding whether she had given it to herself. She sold rice and beans from a wooden table in this market for 30 years. She sent 5 children through school with what the table produced. She sold her mother's necklace so I could buy a plane ticket to America. What she built at that table was not a business. It was a condition. The condition that her children would have choices that she had not had. The condition that the making of food, the specific, daily, unremarkable making of food for the people who needed it, would be understood in this family as work that mattered, that deserved the full attention of the person doing it, that connected the person who made it to the person who received it in a way that no other exchange could fully replicate. I went to America with $40. I built a restaurant. I have been building it for 22 years. When my mother died 4 years ago, she asked me what I was going to leave. Not to my children. She was not worried about them. She asked me what I was going to leave here. I told her I was thinking about it. She said, "Don't think too long. The thinking is not the leaving. This school is the leaving. It will teach children in this neighborhood in the specific language of this neighborhood, with the specific knowledge that is most useful in this specific place, about the world that they were born into, and about the worlds that are available to them if they choose to go toward them. I do not know what they will do with what they learn here. I did not know in 1996 what I would do with $40. What I have learned in the years since is that the beginning is not the prediction of the ending. The beginning is simply the beginning. My mother's table fed this market for 30 years. This school will teach the children of this market for, I hope, longer than that. I am naming it for her because she would have been very bad at receiving credit for anything good she had done. And a school named after you is difficult to be falsely modest about. There was a sound in the courtyard that was laughter and also something else. The specific response of people who have been told something true in a form that surprised them, who were moved by the surprise more than by the sentiment. Chief Adeoye was smiling. Mama Tokumbo was nodding. I looked at Joy, who was standing to my left, and her expression was the one I had seen on her face in the kitchen when she tasted something correctly for the first time. The specific expression of recognition, not of what I had said exactly, but of the person who had said it. The ceremony concluded with the cutting of the ribbon, an actual ribbon, red and white, stretched across the main entrance of the building, which was a formality that I had initially resisted, but that Kolade had advocated for on the grounds that ceremonies needed their specific objects, that the physical act of the ribbon being cut was the thing that made the abstract real, in the way that the certificate is the graduation and the ring is the marriage, that without the object, the ceremony was simply people speaking in a courtyard. He was right. I cut the ribbon, the school opened, we went inside. The classrooms were 6 of them, each with desks and chairs and blackboards, and the specific quality of emptiness that newly opened rooms had. The emptiness of potential rather than vacancy. The emptiness of a space that had been prepared to be used and was waiting for the use.
The library was at the back, under the mango trees, the afternoon light coming through the window at the angle Adekunle had calculated, and that was, in the morning, a few hours away from its peak, but that was already visible in the way the light fell on the shelves and made the books glow with the quality I had imagined, and that had arrived exactly as imagined. Joy went straight to the library. She stood in it for a while, looking at the books in the shelves and the window. "The right conditions," she said. "Yes," I said. Emeka came inside after the ceremony. He had remained at the edge of the courtyard through the ceremony, and he came inside now with the specific ease of someone who has understood that the moment for introductions is after the ceremony rather than during it, which required him to have read the ceremony correctly, which he had, which I noted. I introduced him to Kolade. They shook hands with the specific quality of men who are meeting for the first time in the context of a person they have both known in different ways, each taking the measure of the other through the handshake and the few words that followed. Kolade said, "She told me you were coming." Emeka said, "Did she say anything else?" Kolade looked at me, then back at Emeka. "She said possibly," Kolade said, and went to greet Mama Tokumbo. Emeka looked at me. "Possibly," he said. "I wasn't certain until Tuesday," I said. "What happened on Tuesday?" he said. "I decided I was certain," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'll be in Houston in April, regularly from April." "I know," I said. "There's a specific Tuesday lunch I've been thinking about," he said. "There usually is," I said. Joy came out of the library and found us standing in the hallway between the library and the classroom wing. She looked at Emeka with the direct, comprehensive look she had given him the first time she saw him in the kitchen of Patience's table, the look that read a person rather than simply seeing them. "She told me about you," she said to him. "Did she say anything specific?" he said. "She said possibly," Joy said, and went back to the library. Emeka looked at me. "She is yours," he said. "She is herself," I said. "Both," he said. We left Lagos the following morning.
The flight was at 7, which meant the airport at 5, which meant waking at 3:30 in the guest house with Aunty Tayo's breakfast already prepared and waiting. Akara again, because she had clearly decided this was what we needed in the early morning hours, with the specific amount of crayfish this time that Joy had memorized and that she wrote in her phone in the notes she kept for cooking, alongside the stew and the rice and all the other things she had been noting since we arrived. At the gate, Kolade stood with us until boarding was called. He had brought something, a small wrapped package which he gave to Joy rather than to me, with the deliberateness of someone who had decided in advance who the package was for. Joy opened it. Inside was a small bottle of the palm oil from the market, the specific supplier Kolade had developed a relationship with, whose oil had a color and a quality that Joy had noticed immediately when Aunty Tayo cooked with it. "For the dish," Kolade said. "The one you're naming." Joy looked at the bottle, then at Kolade, then at me. "He understood," she said. "He understood," I agreed. The flight lifted at 7:14. I pressed my face to the window as Lagos fell away beneath us, through the clouds, gone in the specific way it always went, suddenly, without transition, one moment there and then not there, the way you wake from a dream and know it was real while being unable to fully hold it. Joy was asleep beside me before we reached altitude, the specific sleep of someone who had been full of intensity for 2 days and whose body had decided it was time. I looked at her sleeping face, and I thought about the window in the Mushin flat, and the laundry that never dried, and the 2-burner stove, and the table where my mother had made 30 years of food for 5 children and 1 husband, and then 4 children, and then 4 children and herself, and then 3 children and herself, and then 2, and then 1, and then none. The school was open. The library was under the mango trees. The books were on the shelves. Tomorrow morning, the first children would walk through the gate of the Patience Adeyemi Memorial School and sit in the classrooms, and the teachers, who had been hired carefully, would teach them what they needed to learn to become the people they were going to become. I did not know who they were going to become. That was not the point. The point was the condition in which the becoming could happen correctly, in which the thing being made was not determined in advance, but was enabled to determine itself. My mother had created the condition for me with a plane ticket purchased with a necklace and a small boy's bicycle savings, and 30 years of rice and beans from a wooden table. I had created the condition for my daughter by building a kitchen in Houston where she could learn what cooking actually was.
I had created the condition for the children of Mushin by building a school where they could learn what they needed to learn. The conditions were not the achievement. The achievement was what the conditions made possible, which I would not live to see in full, which was correct, which was how conditions worked. We landed at Houston Intercontinental at 5:20 in the afternoon local time, which was 2 days after we had left, accounting for the stop in London. I took a taxi from the airport to Francis Street. Joy was going home to her apartment. She had her bottle of palm oil in her bag and her notes in her phone, and the full memory of 2 days of everything she had seen and tasted and understood, which she would process in her specific way, which was by cooking, and which would eventually produce the dish she had named the right conditions, which I would taste for the first time in about 3 weeks, and which would be, I already knew, exactly right. I went to the restaurant.
It was 7 in the evening Houston time. The dinner service was in its Thursday rhythm. Thomas was at the service station. Keisha was in the kitchen. The server, who had become good, was at the host stand. The restaurant was doing what it did on Thursday evenings, which was everything it was supposed to do. I went to booth number 4. I sat down. I had my bag from the trip still on my shoulder, and I set it on the seat beside me. Through the pass, I could see the kitchen, the specific movement and sound of a service in the middle of its stride. Through the front window, I could see Francis Street, the block, the light of the other businesses, the street light at the corner where I had stood with Emeka in December, in the Houston December air that couldn't quite commit to being cold. I had a cup of tea. Not the restaurant tea. Joy had told the kitchen she was not coming in tonight, which meant Thomas had made tea for me when he saw me arrive, not asking what I wanted, simply making what he knew I would want, which was the personal preparation rather than the restaurant version. I sat in booth number 4 with my tea in the specific quiet of a restaurant's middle service, when the tables are full, but the urgency of the first seating has settled into the steadier rhythm of the middle hours. And I thought about the school. Not anxiously, not strategically, not about what needed to be done next or what the implementation of the curriculum would require, or how the community impact assessment provisions of the council vote would affect the corridor in the months ahead.
I thought about the school the way you think about something that is finished, not finished in the sense of complete, because a school was the most specifically not complete thing. It was the ongoing accumulation of daily teaching and learning that had no ceiling and no final form, but finished in the sense of made, in the sense of the decision having been made and executed, and the thing now existing in the world as a fact, rather than as an intention.
The library was under the mango trees. Tomorrow morning, the children would come. I had been in this booth in every version of my life in Houston for 22 years. I had sat here in grief and in preparation and in decision and in the exhaustion of difficult service, and in the specific quality of ending that came after situations resolved. And each time, the booth had been the container for whatever the sitting required. Tonight, the sitting required nothing except the sitting. There was nothing to decide. There was nothing to document or defend or prepare for. There was the tea and the sound of the kitchen and Francis Street outside, and the building that had been here for 22 years and would be here tomorrow, and would be here, if the work continued to be done correctly, for a long time after that. The school was open. The library was under the mango trees. Somewhere in Mushin, a woman named Adunola had sold rice and beans from a wooden table for 30 years and had not known that it would lead here, and would have said if she had known, "Stop being so dramatic, it's just a table. Go make sure the stove is clean before you start cooking." I drank my tea. The restaurant was full. That is my story this time. Some things you build for the people who are gone. Some things you build for the people who are not yet here. The work is the same either way. The right conditions, created carefully, produce whatever they are going to produce. I will see you in the next one.